Thank you for listening to Conversations for College Success. We're still back at the Afros and Audio Conference in Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm actually back again with Daviana. And I decided to ask her what I think is some important questions as it relates to students going to college for the first time. And so the question I'm going to start with would be, what suggestions would you have for students to consider when they're looking at colleges?
So the big three for me, one, I would start with what I need as an individual. One thing being community, for example. So thinking about whether you need people who look like you at your institution or around your institution. If your community is your family, I do think it's important to consider how close you are going to be to home, how accessible you're going to be to that network, but just knowing what kind of support you're going to need and making sure that the environment in the institution that you're looking at is going to be able to provide that. Second thing I would say would absolutely be thinking about what you are able to expend for this experience, and more specifically finances. That could be a sticky conversation. A lot of folks, because people do not want to admit that college is very expensive, and that makes it very, very, very inaccessible. Personally, I knew that when it came to grad school, the first question I had was, how much is this going to cost? And is that realistic? And my mother decided, we're going to make it work regardless. If someone brings this up and this opportunity that you have, we're going to figure it out. And we did. For my master's, I was able to work and pay portion, and she paid most of it. But when it came to a doctoral program, I knew that if I did not get a program that was fully funded, I personally decided I was not going to go. My mother was still very, very interested in me going, but I personally decided I'm not comfortable going to a program that that's going to require that much out of her. And so the program that I'm currently in, University of Maryland, was the only program that I got into that offered me that. I do work as part of my contract, and that was the deal with the other institutions that I was at. But I also wanted to make sure that wherever I went, it was not going to cost me more than I felt I would get out of it. And with a degree in communication, people will often ask you how much you're going to make or what you can do. And I will not say that it does not pay like STEM or other majors, but there are certain majors that people will guarantee you buckets of money, and there are certain majors where people tell you you might have to work a little bit harder to find those buckets, and communication has felt like one of those areas. But I will say, as my advisor told me when he was convincing me to pursue a career in academia, specifically in communication, we are quite comfortable in communication.
Well, that's always great to hear, and that's always important. And I do want to highlight a couple things. I do think if you can find community, that's great. But I also think, and I'm going to say it most, I won't say it all universities, you can create community. And part of that is going to come from whether it's the students that attend, the staff, or even your professors. Because when I attended college many years ago, one of the things that got me, I'm going to say, engaged was the fact that one of my professors, and it was an African American Studies class, he was so engaging. And what ended up happening is I always ended up walking him back to his office because he always talked so fast. I only got like portions of his notes, and I had to walk back with him to fill in the rest of whatever I missed. But that was just so engaging for me, so that he ended up being a part of keeping me at the university. And then what also happened was there were always students around him. That's literally how engaging he was. So yes, I agree. People who look like you, community that way, but you can also create community in other ways. The other piece would be finances are absolutely critical. And I think in today's age, I've seen one of two types of students. One who they're going to pursue whatever college it is, whatever it costs, and then others who are far more cautious. What I would say, and I'd like your feedback on this, for those who want to pursue, no matter the cost, my point would be you need to do a cost-benefit analysis. And from that perspective, based on what you're spending, what is your return? And whether it's the people that you connect with and meet there because they're the people that can help you get to where you want to go to, or potentially the historical people who have went there who are obviously still living, but that you have the opportunity to meet based on either reunions or other things that take place. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. One of the programs that I'm currently in uses a pot of money from graduates of that same program to help pay for the expenses of students who are not in my similar position to have full funding. And so those things are available, and talk to people, you build that community, you make those relationships, and just know that there is money. You do not realize, I did not realize how much money there was circulating until I was put in the position to be in the room with the folks. The money exists. You need to find the person who is willing to get it to you. If you're in that room, take that as an invitation to figure out where the money is. The money is there. You just need to find it.
I agree with that. And then also students can listen to a previous podcast I had on scholarships. And I was amazed at all the different places that you could find scholarships that were everyday places that I hadn't even thought of. So you're absolutely right as it relates to that. And then the other comment I wanted to make is, and I'm going to say usually, family is usually very interested in making sure that members of their family are successful. And so it is wonderful to hear that your mother was supporting you all the way, wanting you to go to graduate school and then wanting you to get your PhD. And I'm just going to share this. I think while you're young, if you're going to go for a master's or PhD, you should do it earlier instead of later. And even for an undergraduate degree, there's been a lot of discussion on whether or not they think going to college makes sense. I would say depending on the career you want to have, but even in a previous podcast, I mentioned if you want to be an entrepreneur, there's some things you still need to learn. So maybe you don't go to college, but you certainly better go to an accounting or finance class, or there's a marketing class, because these are things you're going to have to do for your business to be successful. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that I hear my mother in my head, because she said the same thing she told me when I was thinking about whether or not I was going to go for a master's. I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll take a gap year. Maybe I'll take some time and work. She said, if you do not go now, you won't go. And that's not to say I absolutely would never have gone. But the thought is, the longer you wait, life happens, things happen. You think of other excuses. If the opportunity is presenting itself, do it then. You will always possibly be able to return to or get the job or take the trip or enjoy. Because even now, as a grad student, a professional student, it feels like I have friends who are already working and life is great. But I know that if I jumped into that lifestyle and got the job and started enjoying myself, I probably would not have returned, because it is also work. And so I do agree that sooner rather than later is better. If there's reasons, as life happens, it sometimes can inhibit you from going. Absolutely reasonable. Not to say if you don't go immediately, you will not go. But if you have opportunity to, do not make excuses for yourself as to not do it sooner rather than later.
And I agree with that. And the other piece I will say, because historically I've always said to students that it's important that you work in your field before you get your master's. And there's definitely truth to that, because sometimes you work in your field and decide you don't like it, or this isn't exactly what I expected. And if you want to change careers, then you get your master's in the different direction you're going in. Because I've also had students who went straight through and then they're not working in that field at all. So their master's really didn't do them any good. So just as a point of reference, I do think if you know exactly what you want to do and you have professors and support systems, whether it's mentors, et cetera, who help you understand here are your options, that makes a difference. Because even if you go into communications, whether it's radio or TV, or actually just become someone who does communications for an organization, it's huge. Or you start your own communications company. There's a number of ways to do that, which is phenomenal and fabulous. And then the other question I would have for you, the mentors that you have had, A, are you glad you've had them? And B, what do you think has been their impact?
Oh, I'm more than glad. Their impact, for one, has been, I don't know a better way to say this, but confidence building, for one. The theme that I mentioned in the last episode was of them being the folks who poured into me, who put the ideas in my head. And I make the joke of them almost feeling like a tug on my shirt collar, like, you need to do this. and they've always been that source for me. Confidence and audacity can grow inside of you, but sometimes it does not help to have it come from the outside, and they've absolutely been that. They've also been just very well-connected people, whether I knew it or not, whether I connected with them because I knew that they would be a connected person or not. I didn't know the resources that any of them had prior to already being connected with them. My undergraduate advisor, who ended up giving me not a cheat code, but a way around the GRE, for example, I had no idea that his name carried that weight until it was time to start applying to schools. And I learned through the grapevine, not even from him, how lucky I was to be connected to him. And the same thing has happened even with the mentors that I now have in my program and mentors at other universities who have decided that regardless of where I go to school, they are always going to position themselves as a resource to me.
That is the true value and measure of mentorship. And students don't necessarily understand that. And I'm pretty sure you stay in contact with these people, at least on a periodic basis, because my experience has been students think that mentors are only there for while you're in college. Mentors are there for as long as you stay connected to them, because they've made, in many respects, a commitment to you. It's, are you willing to make the commitment back to them? And that's been interesting for a number of the students that I've worked with, because those that get it realize, if you need me, I'm there. All you have to do is either pick up the phone or send me an email. And others will struggle. It's like, but you didn't have to. You chose to. And that makes a difference. The other thing I would say, just listening to you, I would almost say some of your mentors have been life-changing.
Oh, absolutely. My mother considers them life-changing. My mother refers to my current advisor as my other mother. And I'm like, I don't know if she would appreciate that. My mother said, well, she is yours for this time. You've moved out of state. You are under her tutelage, whatever she says that you should do. And this has been a theme with my mother and my advisors. If my advisors give me advice, my mother is like, we are trusting these people. They know your potential. They know things about you and things that you could do that I can't even imagine. So at this point, absolutely, these are your parents. They have my full trust when it comes to the trajectory of your career and your life. And as I just said, like, they have put things in my mind and put me in rooms that I nor my mother nor the people in my family could dream of. So absolutely.
And I would agree with that. What was funny was when I was working through a program at Cleveland State University, a number of those students looked at me as their mother as well. And I took it as flattery, if that makes sense, that I felt privileged that they thought that. But that was true. I was trying to put them in front of the people, the organizations, and the opportunities that could make a difference for them. And I think that's critical for people, particularly students, to be aware of. One of the things I always say to students, and you've actually just proven this, you don't know who someone knows. And so you cannot make that judgment that someone can't help you or they don't know the people who can help you. You just don't know them. Once you get to know them, it's up to that person to decide if they're going to open up their network to you or not. It is not an automatic. Part of it is, what is the relationship? What is the drive? What is the determination of that student? And if they have those things, then whether it's a professor, a mentor, whoever, you're willing to open up your network. Because what I don't think students understand is, if I introduce you to my network, you're now an extension of me. You better represent me well. And one of the things I would tell my students is, if I ever show up unannounced, you're in trouble. You should always know that I'm going to show up, whether it's an employer or whatever. So if I show up unannounced, you've either done something wrong or we need to correct some things. That was a rude eye-opening for a number of students as it relates to that. But again, it's about being honest. It's about telling people, whether they want to hear it or not, what they need to know. I always said to students, I will never talk about you behind your back. I'm going to tell you to your face. Now, what you do with that information, I don't control. But it's trying to help someone to be successful in the direction they're going to, whether it's now or they may have to pivot or do other things. All of that makes a difference. And so I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, because that is important. And I'm going to ask you, are there any other final comments you might want to make around your experience, whether it's undergrad, master's program, doctoral program, or even your future?
Well, the thing that is coming to mind for me as we finish is now I'm in a season where I'm becoming a mentor. I have a few mentees, even though I struggle to use the word. I see myself not as a mother, but more as a cousin of sorts. I currently have a former student of mine who took my Rhetoric of Black America course, who is currently my colleague in my doctoral program. And I also serve as a mentor for CP3, which is a communication PhD pipeline recruiting students of color to pursue doctorate, specifically Black students. And I have, from this position, just seen how impressed and understood how impressed I am with my students and my now peers. And it also makes me think differently about my relationship with my mentors and really see the ways that they do, even in the ways they communicate with me, see me as a peer. And I think that also makes my relationship with them so much closer to be in their position now for someone else. I do really believe that good mentors are produced by good mentors. And so it's also important to think about the ways that your mentors look and learn from you.
Oh, and that's actually critical. I'm so glad you said that because it really is a two-way street. Although students don't usually typically think of it that way, it really is. The mentor is learning things as well as the mentee is learning things. And whether that's to have a better connection with other students or ways to work with other students, those things do make a difference on the mentor side. And so from that perspective, I would like to thank you for your time, your information. This has just been a fabulous opportunity, and I'm so glad again to have attended the Afros and Audio event in Baltimore, Maryland. And I think they say it's always in October now. Don't know the location. This is their sixth year, and it's just been phenomenal. And I would like to thank Daviana for her time and interest in taking the time to talk with me. It's been wonderful. And then finally, to my listeners, thank you so much. And also to my subscribers, I really appreciate you. And if you're a new listener, please don't hesitate to become a subscriber. If you have any questions, please contact Conversations for College Success at hotmail.com. Again, Conversations for College Success at hotmail.com for any questions. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Daviana.
Thank you for having me.